when he began dating our mother, Jean Teague. At the time, Terry was 15, our now deceased sister Susan was 13, I was 12, and my little brother Jim was 8 years old. Herb and Mom married in 1972, and they were together until the day she died on April 17th, 1999, 28 years later. Herb adored our mother and showed it in many ways. When they met, she had just opened her own accounting firm, and she put in long hours, especially during tax time. Herb was always there to cook nutritious dinner and keep the house clean. When she became ill at the age of 64, Herb was the one who made sure she ate and had plenty of library books to pass the time. Herb influenced all of our lives, but he had the greatest impact on the youngest of us, my little brother Jim. Our father was still in the picture, but not on a daily basis. Jim was only 8 years old, and Herb was the only real father figure he ever had. Herb taught him how to play cribbage, and they spent hours playing countless games. Herb taught him how to fish, which is one of Jim's favorite pastimes to this day. Herb taught him about cars, how to run a boat, how to build stuff. Jim said Herb taught him most of the things a father teaches their son about how to be a man. After Mom died, Jim and Herb spent about a month searching for the perfect place for Herb. When they found paradise, Herb said, "This is it." Upon hearing of the fire, my siblings and I attempted to contact Herb to no avail. Jim drove up from the Bay Area and searched the shelters, the parking lots, the evacuation camps. I called everyone, the Sheriff's Department, the Paradise Police Department, the hospitals, the Butte County Coroner, Sacramento County Coroner. With no word on his whereabouts, I contacted the Butte County Task Force and reported Herb as missing. Days passed and we were unable to find any clue as to where Herb might be. We agonized over the possibility that he could be injured without anyone to comfort and care for him. Herb had no children of his own, no surviving relatives. We were his only family. After several days, I spoke again with a member of the Missing Persons Task Force. I was told that Herb had been marked safe. When I asked where he was, a deputy told me he couldn't give me any other information. We were thrilled that Herb was safe, but at the same time infuriated that there was no more information. We had no way of knowing what his physical or emotional condition was, where he was, whether or not his needs were being met. After 12 days of being in an emotional roller coaster, Butte County Sheriff's Deputy Tiffany Larson called and told me in the kindest and most compassionate way possible that remains had been found in the rubble where Herb's home once stood. Our hearts sank. Herb was 79 at the time of his death. He didn't get around very well and he didn't drive, but he was still sharp as a tack. And he knew everything that was going on around him. Herb had been receiving physical therapy at home from the staff at Ascent Care. I spoke to Barbara, the receptionist, who told me she had been on the phone with Herb the morning of the fire. She said he called at least 5 times, each sounding more panicky and desperate. He was pleading for help, begging for someone to come and get him. Barbara tried to keep him calm and told him someone was on the way. His last words to her were, "The fire is 2 houses away, help me." Then the phone went dead. For the record, the wonderful people of Ascent Care had sent somebody to rescue Monty, as they called him, but they were unable to reach him as they were turned back at a roadblock. My prevailing thought has been how absolutely terrified Herb must have been. My heart aches for him. These are the words of my sister Terry. This has left an indelible emotional scar that haunts my dreams. My heart breaks thinking of how Herb must have been terrified as he watched the flames creep ever closer with no hope of escape. At almost 80 years old, he was physically frail and lived alone, so there was no one there to comfort him or help him flee to safety. He was trapped in a metal hotbox of a trailer that would soon be completely engulfed in flames. No human being should ever have to suffer the unimaginable pain and terror of dying by fire. Although PG&E, the corporation, has pled guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the Camp Fire, it was not a corporation that made the decision over and over and over again to divert monies that should have been spent on equipment maintenance and vegetation control. Those decisions were made by people. People focused on profits. People who will never pay a price for the utter devastation of whole communities and the deaths of 84 people in the Camp Fire alone. In closing, I would like to thank the many first responders who put their lives on the line to lead so many citizens out of the firestorm to safety. I would also like to thank Deputy Tiffany Larson of the Butte County Sheriff's Department for her graceful handling of the situation throughout the 336 days it took to officially identify Herb's remains. Her compassion, patience, and understanding helped me more than she could ever know. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Teague.
Your Honor, the next victim to be spoken of is Julian Binstock by his brother, Philip Binstock.
By his son.
I'm sorry.
Good morning, Mr. Binstock.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. For the record, could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Yes, sir. My name is Philip Binstock, and Binstock is spelled B as in boy, I-N-S-T-O-C-K.
Thank you, Mr. Binstock. You may go ahead.
When I started this task, I didn't know what to write about. I had written about my father's accomplishments, having been raised in an abysmally poor family, going to Harvard on a full scholarship, and retired from Warner Brothers as the VP of Foreign Operations. I didn't know how to begin. And then, as I started looking at the history of PG&E, it seemed appropriate. Approximately 1,500 wildfires every year. Hinckley, 1952 to 1966, contaminated water tables, yet failed to disclose that for 21 years. The Trona Fire, 94, Sierra Wildfire, substation fire in San Francisco, Pandola Fire, a San Francisco fire substation, the Sims Fire, the Fred's Fire, an explosion and electrical fire in San Francisco, Rancho Cordova explosions in 2008. PG&E had installed the wrong pipe in 2006. A San Francisco electrical fire and explosion 2009 due to a faulty power line from the 1920s. That's 4 in San Francisco. I don't know what PG&E has against that county. San Bruno pipeline, Carmel gas explosion, Butte fire, Ghost fire, 17 wine country fires, Redwood fire, Sulphur fire, Cherokee fire, 37 fire, Blue fire, Pocket fire, Atlas fire, Norbom fire, Adobe fire, Patrick fire, Pythian fire, Nuns fire, Cascade fire, and then the 2018 Camp Fire. What I would say, if I were directing this to PG&E, is I would tell them they murdered 85 people, 84 in the fire, and 1 who committed suicide rather than be burned to death, and at least 3 elderly citizens who died a few days later because of the stress of being left homeless and penniless. I would tell PG&E these were not manslaughter cases that you were charged because you had the capacity to know that what you were doing would kill people. With over 1,500 annual wildfires and the specific disasters I listed, you knew that what you were doing was wrong. And rather than reduce your bonuses, you allowed your failed equipment and your improper inspections to kill people. And that is homicide with malice aforethought, and that is murder. I would go on to tell PG&E, you murdered my dad. And I don't know how he died. I'll never know whether it was asphyxiation as the fire sucked the oxygen out of his house, smoke inhalation, or a heart attack from burning to death. I would tell PG&E tonight, PG&E's upper management, tonight you should think about how much it would hurt to hold a lighter flame under your forearm. And now imagine this all over your body, in your eyes, mouth, nose, ears, and lungs as you inhale smoke up to 2,000 degrees. You thrash around blindly, your clothes have been burned into your melted skin. And if you can hear anything, it is only the sound of the fire. In my father's case, he might have heard his dog whimpering and howling, and you did that to 85 people. I would go on to tell PG&E, and what's even more galling is that you will retain your bonuses, and through my PG&E bills, I will be paying your bonuses, your fines, your shareholders' dividends, and your settlements. Unfortunately, what follows probably isn't appropriate to say in court. I could go on and talk about your corruption. We learned that you spent $79 million lobbying and evading taxes from 2008 to 2010. And despite a $4.8 billion profit and increasing executive pay by 94% in 2010, you paid no taxes but got a $1 billion tax rebate. 2014, California government investigation revealed that some of your top executives had regular communications with the California Public Utilities Commission for years. You'd allegedly been judge shopping during this time. You were charged with 12 criminal felony counts alleging violations on the Natural Gas Pipeline Safety Act. An investigation in 2018 showed that PG&E violated state laws, endangered its own employees, and endangered California residents through illicit practices every year between 2012 and 2016. After the San Bruno pipeline explosion, PG&E was sentenced to 5 years probation, $3 million in fines and community service, and also fined $1.6 billion by the CPUC. Victims' settlements were $565 million. In a separate case, PG&E falsified gas pipeline records from 2012 to 2017. PG&E failed to implement legally mandated safety procedures. And the CPUC in 2018 reported that between 2012 and 2017, PG&E failed to locate and mark gas pipelines in a timely manner because of shortages of staff, and management listed tens of thousands of late tickets as completed on time. So I would say to PG&E, so not only are you mass murderers, you're also thieves, liars, and forgers. Judge, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Binstock.
Next, Your Honor, will be victim Paul Ernest. And speaking about Mr. Ernest will be his daughter, Ariel Funk.
Good morning, Ms. Funk.
Morning, Your Honor.
And if you could please, for the record, let us know your name and spell your last name, please.
Yep, my name is Ariel Funk, F-U-N-K.
Thank you. You can go ahead now.
My name is Ariel Funk. My father, Paul Ernest, died due to complications from injuries he sustained during the Camp Fire. I'm here today to speak for my brothers, Jesse and Jake Ernest, and our mother, Susan Ernest. My dad survived the day of the fire, although he was badly burned. Third-degree burns down to the bone on some parts of his body. He spent 9 months in intensive care with burns covering over 30% of his body. A previously healthy, active man, he spent the last year of life unable to walk, take care of himself, breathe on his own, or even talk, which if you knew my dad was probably the most torturous part. November 8th, 2018 has become that day for our family, the defining landmark by which events either came before the campfire or after the campfire. And in reality, there was our life before the fire, blessed, routine, happy, and there's our life after the fire, still not stable, sad, uncharted territory. Pre-fire, we had an ideal life. My parents' life always revolved around family. They were involved in our schooling and extracurricular activities, sports, music, dance. They made sacrifices so they could take us on trips every opportunity they got, wanting to expose us to culture, national parks, the outdoors, and new experiences. As we grew into adults, they were there to guide us with advice and help watch our kids during the work week. They took joy in spending time with the grandkids. Once both retired, they traveled and spent time with friends. My dad loved the outdoors, and when not watching the grandkids, could be found on an outdoor excursion or planning the next adventure with his friend Bob. The day of the fire was chaos. Jake, my brother who lives in Carlsbad, felt helpless as he heard about the fire on the news. I also lived in Paradise, and about 2.5 hours into evacuating with my own family, in which we were only able to travel approximately 1.5 miles, a message came through from Jesse. He'd been in phone contact with our parents, and they couldn't get off their road, Edgewood Lane. Traffic was gridlocked, and fire had already engulfed the mobile home park at the entrance to their road, making it unpassable. They had decided to attempt to escape on their ATVs on the familiar trails with their neighbor, Travis Wright. The last contact Jesse had with them, they were clearing vegetation in preparation as the fire had come from the opposite direction and was going to overtake them. After that, Jesse was unable to get in contact with them. What we would later find out, the fire burned over them as they lay on the ground, my dad covering my mom with his body. Travis stayed mobile and miraculously avoided serious burns. He was able to ride his ATV to get help and led CAL FIRE to rescue our parents. They were both airlifted to the UC Davis burn unit. The months after the fire were, I think, the longest of any of our lives. Days were spent at my parents' bedsides. Family and friends took turns being there for excruciatingly painful skin grafts. They each had about 6. Recoveries, more surgeries, talk of amputation, forward progress, and major complications. Jesse, an independent contractor in Chico, postponed or canceled most of his jobs. Jake, a sales manager who travels all over the country for work, scheduled all business trips to go through Sacramento in order to be at the hospital as often as possible. I also lost my house in the fire, unfortunately. My work was accommodating. My in-laws had taken us in, so I was able to be at the hospital in between figuring out insurance, kids' school, and the rest of life. My parents always had all the answers, and here we were now in new territory making major life decisions for them. After 4 months in the hospital, the majority in the burn ICU, my mom was healed enough to be released from the hospital. My dad, however, had numerous complications and eventually had to have a tracheostomy tube inserted. He would have good days where he seemed alert and cognizant. These days were promising, but also gut-wrenching, as he often communicated he did not want us to leave or begged us to get him out of there. There were also days where he was barely awake and confused the little bit that he was. These days were painful because they were an indication that he wasn't progressing towards getting better. The stress took its toll on all of us. My dad passed away on August 5th. Today, the aftermath of the fire remains an unwelcome and overwhelming part of our lives. There's a deep sadness and sorrow of things we will never get to share with Dad. He won't be present at the grandkids' school or sports events. He won't be present at our annual family beach bash. We won't get to eat his homegrown produce that he worked so hard to grow and was so proud of. We won't get to honor him on Veterans Day, which was the only time he allowed us to treat him. We won't get to make another turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, his favorite holiday. No more fishing trips. We won't get to see him dance with reckless abandon to a Rolling Stones song. We won't get to see his tears of pride. But the most upsetting part is that he's not here to help my mom through the biggest hardship of her life. I can't aptly describe how my mom's life has been altered. The fire took her home, her town, her familiar way of life, and her husband. It stole her mobility, confidence, self-worth, purpose, security, and happiness. She's been left to navigate life without her partner. She still has open wounds, grafts that haven't healed, that require daily care and bi-monthly visits to the burn clinic at UC Davis. We are forever grateful to their neighbor Travis and the firefighters and medics who heroically rescued my parents. We are indebted to the staff at the burn unit and the Firefighters Burn Institute, Vibra, and Riverbend, who kept our hopes up when we felt hopeless. We are grateful to friends and family who supported us emotionally and financially, so we were able to do everything we could to save my dad. I hope hearing our stories makes you understand just how much that day changed every aspect of all our lives. One of the burn staff told us that they feel my dad saved my mom twice. Once from the fire, and then again by staying alive long enough to give her the will to recover. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Funk.
The next victim, Your Honor, to be spoken of is John Sedwick, and by his daughter Sky and Lehoki. Okay, I butchered that, sorry.
Was it Sky Lahaki?
It's actually, I've changed it back to Sedwick, so
That'll be easy to remember. Thank you.
Sedwick is fine. Thank you.
And could I make sure you talk into that microphone so that we can hear you? Maybe move that. I'm not sure if you can move that any closer with that stand there, but
How's that? Is that good?
yeah, that
Is
is,
it on?
it's on.
Okay.
And could I have you state your name for the record and spell your last name, please?
Sure. My name is Sky Sedwick, Sedwick.
Thank you, Ms. Sedwick. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor, for this opportunity. My name is Sky Sedwick. My father was John Christopher Sedwick, and due to the ongoing negligence and culture of greed of PG&E, my father is dead. You may think that at his age of 82 caused fragility and that contributed to his death. That's not the case. My father was not the stereotypical 82-year-old. He still worked full-time, 32 hours a week. He planned on retiring in December of 2018. Sadly, my father never got to enjoy retirement. My father also taught Sunday school and was a dossier at the Gold Nugget Museum. He was a musician that played every Saturday at the Senior Center in Oroville. He held that gig for 20 plus years. And I can assure you that to many of the seniors that attended Saturday mornings, the music died with my father. Since that was an unpaid gig, it has not been filled since. My father was in the process of writing a book. He called it his legacy. He spent countless hours researching, reciting chapters to whoever would listen, and dictating the script into his computer. Every page of that book, the computer and the author perished that November day. His legacy up in smoke. This continues to break my heart. Because of the passion he had for that book. I know he regrets not finishing it. And I wish I could do it for him. But the subject matter is not anywhere near my area of expertise. So the story remains untold. My father was the type of person to stop for any disabled vehicle along the side of the road and ask the driver if they needed his assistance. He filled jugs up of water and placed them on the side of the road of Skyway in the summer months in case a vehicle was overheating going up the hill. He flashed his headlights at drivers that did not have their headlights on religiously at dusk, or during inclement weather. He followed and chastised any driver or passenger if he witnessed a lit cigarette tossed from a vehicle. I assure you, if you received that lecture, you would never throw a cigarette out of a vehicle again. His years as a volunteer firefighter, coupled with living on the bridge during wildfires, made him an authority on the matter of fire and safety. Had my father worked for PG&E, the culture would have changed, or he would have done all he could to see to that change, or he would have left. He would not have ever allowed his name to be associated with a culture that devalues human life and destroys the land and trees he loved so much. I say this because it is my hope that as PG&E moves forward, that they hire employees like my father. When I think about how many people did not do their job properly, or how greedy the company was to not replace the equipment that caused this fire, it sickens me. How many failed opportunities to prevent this tragedy? It is this culture of apathy, neglect, and greed that has become synonymous with PG&E, and I wonder what will it take for that to change. How many more have to die? If I were to speak to PG&E, I would implore them today to do all that it is in their power to change that culture. It's true that this company will serve no prison time, and it's impossible to truly hold the people responsible for the oversight and neglect of PG&E's equipment. However, unless you sit before me today without a conscience, if you do not change that culture and more die as a result, then their blood is on your hands. And there is a court bigger than this. You can call that court karma or judgment day or whatever you subscribe to. Maybe it will be a guilty conscience, again, provided you have one. To know you could have prevented the music from dying, or a man's legacy going up in smoke, or robbing a man of his retirement, or creating a void in a family that can never be refilled because their father, their grandfather, their uncle, or brother died trying to save his home from fire. You see, my father fought that fire all day long. He called me at 10:30 at night, and he told me that he was okay, that he and the house were okay, but everything else was gone. That meant our barn and all our vehicles. I was so happy to hear from him. It wasn't until the fire came across the canyon for the second time that my exhausted from working alongside of firemen all day, and that's when he perished in the flames. I lived with my father, and I could never imagine losing so much in one day. All my worldly belongings, my home, and my father gone. As I mourned my father, I longed for a shred of clothing, something that was his, that I could hold, smell, and there was nothing. I can't express here today how much he is missed by so many. He was a bit eccentric and certainly marched to the beat of his own drum, but I assure you it was a beat I can only aspire to march to. I hope and pray his legacy didn't entirely burn that day, but instead it shifted and became a legacy of compassion and safety in a world that lacks both. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sedwick.
Your Honor, the next victim to be spoken of is Judy Cypher, and that will be by Wally Cypher, her son.
Good morning, Mr. Cypher.
Good morning.
And could I ask you to, for the record, state your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Walter Cypher, Cypher.
And make sure you're speaking into that microphone so we can all hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Walter Cypher from Chico, California, and I'm the oldest brother of Judith Cypher, who passed away in the Camp Fire. She was the 84th victim to be identified. It took over 9 months. Judy and I spoke on the phone that morning. About 8:15, 8:20, I told her, boy, there's a fierce-looking cloud coming from your direction. And she said, yeah, the TV's on. It's a fire in Pulga. I'm not worried. And I said, I think you better be. That is a pretty black cloud. It's not trees burning. There's a whole lot more burning besides trees. Judy was experiencing flu-like symptoms at the time, and she said that she's going to have to skip our luncheon engagement at Black Bear Diner, her favorite place. And anyway, she said, yeah, I'm not worried. I'm feeling pretty bad, but I'll be okay. That fire is 10 miles away. It'll never get here in South Paradise. She lived near the bowling alley and that CHIP housing project. I tried to get up there because I was worried, but the Sheriff's Department and then Highway Patrol did a great job keeping people from going up the hill. They probably saved my life because I was certain she needed my help. So 90 minutes after our conversation, it was all over. That place was gone by about 10 o'clock in the morning. It's hard to believe. It's just, it was an apartment complex of 10 units, and the whole place was leveled, we found out 3 days later. And during those 3 days, we were going, like Miss Teague said, we're going to every shelter, every hospital, phone calls to the Sheriff's Department, bothering everybody we could. Nothing. Nothing just vanished. So like I said, it took 3 days before we got a call from a sheriff's deputy that was standing on the site and said that there's nothing here. And so I knew with her condition, with the flu, and she used a walker to get around, that she did not make it out. So they swabbed me a couple of times, my DNA, and tried to match it to hers, and it just wasn't enough left to even make to identify her. It was so obliterated. So Judy was only 68 years old, and she moved up to Paradise, just loved it up there, to help me take care of our aging parents, who have since passed away. And so that's where Judy is right now, in the Paradise Cemetery with Mom and Dad. She was lighthearted, had a great sense of humor, constant smile. And she'll be forever missed by her 2 brothers, numerous nieces and nephews, and cousins scattered all over the western United States. It's been 19 months, and we're still grieving.
Thank you, Mr. Cypher.
Your Honor, the next victims to be spoken of is Frederick and Phyllis Salazar. And speaking will be Richard Salazar.
Good morning, Mr. Salazar. For the record, could you please tell us your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Richard Salazar. It's Salazar.
All right, thank you, Mr. Salazar. And if you could just make sure you're speaking into that microphone so we can all hear you.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm the adopted son, one of 4 adopted children by the Salazars. I was 11 when they adopted us. And been in the system since I was 3. So we'd been through some hard times, me and my brothers and sisters, but the Salazars, they were there for us, and they've always been there for us. They were very active in the community, in the church. My dad played the piano for the church. My mom was the records keeper. My dad would work for he did the food closet in Paradise. I would help him. I also sang in the church, in the choir with my parents. I practiced on the piano with my dad. There isn't a day that hasn't gone by that I don't feel I miss them. I miss them very, very much. Because they were everything to me. I don't know if you know what that's like, not to be in a system where you don't have anything, but then someone comes along like these wonderful people did and made me the man I am today. I ain't great, but I do my best. They didn't need to go this way. They were good people. I'm sure I'm not the only one who misses them. My brothers and sisters aren't here, but I am. And I just want to say, it shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. I hope you guys can do better. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar.
Youngs? Still, okay. At this point, Your Honor, it appears we're still waiting for one of the next of kin. We're not sure they'll be here, but be my proposal, Your Honor. We have 20 minutes left in this session. And as I've indicated to the court previously, there was a number of people who obviously could not be here. They have moved to other parts of the country. And it was the intent to read the statements that they had sent in to the Victim Assistance Bureau. And with the court's permission, I could probably start doing that now to fill in that time.
That would be acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey.
Is not coming,
Okay.
so you want us to take these votes out and make them sit here on this?
No, that'll be good. So if we could have just about 2 minutes and let us have the people that are here, the next of kin, if they could leave the courtroom if they so wish.
That would be fine. Ladies and gentlemen, we've obviously wanted, as you've been, I'm sure, told by victim witness, we wanted to keep the groups together, again, for coronavirus-related issues, so you're not mixing up too much with other folks. But at this point in time, if you wish, you are free to leave. If you want to stay put until we reach 10 o'clock, that would be fine as well.
Your choice.
court's permission.
You may proceed, Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you. The victim of which we will speak is Joyce Acheson, A-C-H-E-S-O-N. This is a statement by the next of kin, Janice Walcott, W-A-L-C-O-T-T, Ayers, A-Y-E-R-S. Ayers writes, PG&E's failure to assure their equipment, policies, and procedures provide safe and updated service to their clients resulted in a deadly, fast-moving, and major fire that completely destroyed the town of Paradise and killed 84 people in the process. Although my sister Joyce and I were not close, she's 10 years older than me, we had been connecting through email in the year or two before her death. She had some mental health issues that made it difficult for her to maintain close emotional contacts with her family, but our most recent connection was important to us. I knew she was not in good health. I was in the process of getting her newer computer equipment and other things she needed to help her recover from her recent hospitalizations and to stay in contact with us. She had no other family, no spouse, no children. When the fire broke out, my eldest sister, who is 91, and I both tried to call Joyce. We did not get any answer at her home, so I called the sheriff's office. When I was finally able to get through, they took her information and said they knew, if they knew anything, they would let us know. I called daily, but there was no information. The members of my family and I spent hours daily searching social media, using a special Facebook pages that had been set up, calling hospitals, shelters, Red Cross, anyone who could think who might have some information. Our days were spent trying to determine her whereabouts and the condition of her well-being. We repeatedly called the sheriff's office without being able to obtain any information at all. It was almost 2 weeks after the fire started that I got a call from the sheriff's office telling me that they had gone into her still standing apartment and found her body there. This was a very emotionally devastating way to hear of her passing, even though we knew at some level this was ultimately what we would find out. I then called my older sister to let her know. We needed to have a DNA test to assure that it was her body. So my nephew, the son of my deceased brother, who lives in Chico, volunteered to provide his DNA. I then received a call from the funeral service in Chico on the day before Thanksgiving to let me know they had her body. On Thanksgiving, I heard from the sheriff's department it was indeed my sister. All of this taken together has caused a great deal of stress. The anxiety, stress, sadness, and grief caused as a result of this horrible tragedy adds to the normal sadness and grief one experiences when losing a loved one. I do not have ongoing financial repercussions due to the loss of my sister. I did not lose property. However, the amount of total loss for the people of Paradise in this instance is immense. It is unconscionable on the part of PG&E to allow this to happen. They continue to prioritize their shareholders and their profits rather than ensure their equipment is maintained and that there are procedures in place to prevent future fires. PG&E was already under court supervision for the gas fire in San Bruno. There were deadly fires in 2017, and still the 2018 Paradise fire wiped out a town, took 85 lives, including the life of my sister. The next victim to be spoken of would be Teresa Ammons. And this is from the Julie Gonzalez. And Ammons, A-M-M-O-N-S, and Julie Gonzalez, that's G-O-N-Z-A-L-E-Z. Ms. Gonzalez writes, my name is Julie Gonzalez, and I'm writing this victim impact statement jointly with my sister, Natalie Wyatt, W-Y-A-T-T, as it relates to the tragic loss of our loving mother, Teresa Ammons. Natalie and I lost her mom during the campfire, which occurred November 8th, 2018. The pain and suffering of the residents of Paradise, the destruction of real and personal property, the personal injury of fleeing victims, the loss of the community, and the loss of life of 84 innocent victims is criminal. Our mother simply wanted to live her life peacefully and share her time with her family and friends. Our mom did not deserve to die in the unimaginable circumstances due to the management failure of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We are looking for justice to be served by PG&E in this matter, as we have to live our lives knowing that we will not have our loving mother forever. PG&E was responsible for the operation and maintenance of the transmission line equipment that caused the fire. Unfortunately, their equipment was not maintained or updated with public safety in mind. And this management philosophy and lack of maintenance resulted in an antiquated equipment igniting the campfire in the early morning hours of November 8th, 2018. This fact has been proven by CAL FIRE and other investigative agencies. The fire moved quickly from the PG&E ignition source over a small hill to our mom's subdivision mobile home park on the eastern side of Paradise. Our mom's Paradise home, as well as the entire community of homes in the Ridgewood mobile home park was destroyed in a matter of minutes. Our mom's remains were found a short distance outside of her home, along with the charred remains of her purse, including her Social Security card, credit cards, and small sentimental mementos, in a frantic attempt to flee her home and save her life. PG&E's negligence was undoubtedly the cause of the fire and the reason for our mom's passing. We believe PG&E engaged in a criminal act of sustained negligence for decades and should face maximum penalties for the death of our mom. The sudden death of our mom has left an indelible mark upon both my sister and me, one that will never leave as long as we live. Teresa Ammons was a wonderful person who deeply cared for and loved both of us, her family, and her friends. She loved her 6 grandchildren dearly and made a point to see them often. Holidays and birthdays without our mother being there can never be replaced and will always be sad for us. There's also the anniversary date of the campfire to add to our sadness. Additionally, our mom loved the town and the community of Paradise. Upon retirement in 1993, she moved to Paradise from Southern California and enjoyed the quaint, small-town feel for 25 years. She considered Paradise her home until her death. Teresa Ammons was one of 7 children. Not only is she missed by us, but our mom has an extended family to include her sisters, nieces, nephews, and cousins who will miss her deeply. Without her, our family bonds are broken forever. While Natalie and I were impacted by funeral, burial, and cemetery and transportation, other related costs along the way, the most significant impact on us is the way she died, as we will always have that in our memory. Our mom did not deserve to die in the way she did due to PG&E's failure, which caused the campfire and her death. The most difficult part for us to deal with is that our mom desperately tried to escape the fire, but had no chance. The fact that our family has to live with the memory of her frantic attempt to live, given the dire circumstances, placed an emotional toll on every one of us daily. There is no way to escape the memory. It will be with us forever. And it'd be Carlson and Shirley Haley. This would be victims Barbara Carlson, also Shirley Haley. The next of kin here is Glenn Carlson. He writes, "To whom it may concern, my name is Glenn Carlson. and my 2 other siblings, Chris and Tammy, our mom, Barbara Carlson, and our aunt, Shirley Haley, was taken from us by the Paradise Campfire. As everyone else's life has changed. For our family, it was the death of our mom and our aunt. It has impacted the lives of my mom's great grandkids and great great grandkids. We are lost, as are the grandparents' house where my mom and aunt lived. For me and my brother and sister, we lost 3 generations of memories and stuff that belonged to our grandparents, that also belonged to my dad when in his younger years he rode in the rodeo and also was in the military. As some examples of the stuff that belonged to us kids and has been lost. Karate. This is victim Vincent Carota, C-A-R-O-T-A. It's written by one of his brothers, Greg Carota. Reads, "My name is Greg Carota, and I am one of the brothers of Vincent Mario Carota. Not only am I his brother, but I am also his identical twin. Vincent and I had a special connection that only twins can understand. Vincent was closer to me than anyone can imagine, as he was my other half. We shared a womb and were adopted together as young children. He was the only true blood sibling that I'll ever know, and that was taken from me in this tragedy. We were always there for one another, and that was stolen from me abruptly due to the negligence of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. This tragedy should never have happened. Pacific Gas and Electric should have been aware of the pending danger. However, they failed to properly maintain the power lines and causing this tremendous tragedy. Tragedy has had an effect upon me and my family. Not only did we lose a brother, we lost a friend. He was full of life and laughter. He made the best of life, and he loved his family through his pain of having part of his leg amputated. Vincent did not deserve to die this way. He was handicapped with only having 1 foot and didn't have a running car for transportation. He was trapped in his mobile home and consumed by a fire that could have been prevented by proper maintenance by Pacific Gas and Electric Company. The financial impact on our family has been as follows. I am saddened daily that he is truly gone. I try my best to deal with the sadness and the loneliness in living without my twin. I've installed a memorial on the wall in my home to honor and remember him. Sometimes the sadness and the thoughts that I can't pick up the phone to call and share my thoughts with him are overwhelming. Although it's been 1.5 years, the sadness still comes in waves. I continue to pray for him that God, in his mercy, welcomed him to his heavenly kingdom. I pray that when it is my time, we will meet again." This will be Evelyn Klein. And the statement is from Richard Klein, and this is C-L-I-N-E. "My name is Richard Klein. Evelyn Klein was my aunt and my Uncle Richard's wife. In the months leading up to the fire, I was able to go see her twice, once with my parents and once with my dog. She could no longer care for pets due to her physical immobility, but she was a true animal lover. I enjoyed spoiling her with her favorite foods, and I was happy to see my dog bring a smile to her face. We mostly hung out in her living room and binge watched The Golden Girls and Fear Factor because she liked watching people eat bugs. Aunt Ev was not your average elderly person. I believe the campfire which devastated Paradise was largely caused by gross negligence on the part of PG&E. If the power lines and vegetations in their proximity had been properly maintained, the fire would not have happened, at least on this scale. On November 8th, I received a phone call from my cousin Linda. She was the most involved with taking care of Aunt Ev. She was frantic. She told me that Paradise was on fire and that she couldn't reach her. Several of Ev's caretakers attempted but were unable to help her escape because the police would not allow them through. I immediately got on police radio channels and began calling police departments in and around the area to get answers, but there was only chaos. I joined several local Facebook groups and tried to get information about her in the following months. There were a few moments of false hope when people told me she was rescued or they believed they saw her. Unfortunately, they were wrong. She was gone. Answers would take many months and endless lengths of red tape. The extended contemplation and time on the campfire-related Facebook groups took their toll on me. I began taking medication for depression for the first time in my life at the age of 36. Now that more than a year has passed, we have received all the answers we will get. I still think about what I could have done to help her, but I am more than 13 hours away from town that was completely engulfed at the time, by the time I could have got there. Linda especially struggles with self-blame and grief for what happened to Aunt Ev. She was supposed to be there when the fire happened, but it changed her schedule. Evelyn was 82 years old, but she was entirely lucid. She had a sharp wit and an incredible sense of humor. As much as I tell myself that she might not have suffered in her death, logic and reason tell me that she did. 10 o'clock here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be in recess at this time. We will reconvene at 10:30.
suffered in her death, logic and reason tell me that she did. 10 o'clock here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be in recess at this time. We will reconvene at 10:30.
that house was built by my father. That was the last house he built before he died. And she wanted to stay there for the remainder of her life. And it was destroyed. The other thing was we lost everything. And I lost her. I didn't realize how much she meant to me until she was gone. She really did love paradise. She felt safe in paradise. She didn't want to live anyplace else because she did feel safe there. But then this happened. And we remember what kind of woman she was. She was a wonderful woman. She did not deserve to die like this at all. Nobody deserves to die like this at all. The thing is, we remember what kind of woman she was. She loved cooking. She loved her little critters. She had rabbits on the property. She fed all the time. But the thing I remember the most was her beautiful singing voice. She had a very angelic voice that everybody that heard her said she had a beautiful voice. I'm going to miss hearing her singing. And the other thing is, my sister was the last one to talk to her on the phone like a week before. And she remembered the last thing she said to our mother, and she said, "I love you, Mom." And because of this, I never got the opportunity to say, "I love you, Mom." So I'm just going to remember the woman she was and how much she meant to me and all she did for me. And how she lived and how she died. So I'm going to miss her. And I just want everybody to know that, yes, Mom, I do love you.
Ms. Andrade, thank you.
The next victim is Vincent Carrata, and be spoken of by Esther Carrata.
And good morning, ma'am. Could we have your name, please, and could you spell your last name?
My name is Esther Carota, C-A-R-O-T-A.
Thank you, Ms. Carrota. You can go ahead.
I was the sister-in-law of Vincent Carota. Vincent lived on South Liberty Road, 7 houses down from my house. I brought him up there after he had gone through life-threatening illnesses, such as diabetes, amputation of his right leg, and stents. Vincent and I got along very well. I cared for him. I set his house up. I bought his food, watched his diet as best I could. Vincent sometimes could be a very unhappy person and depressed and would call me in the middle of the night. I was always there to answer his questions. I would take him to appointments, and sometimes he was very nice and compassionate, and sometimes he wasn't. But I always attributed that to Vincent's diagnoses. I am 70 years old now, and I'm a retired nurse. I have cared for people for the last 46 years of my life. Vincent was just another, and I will always remember him as someone who was very needy. I have neither the time nor the stamina to rebuild my life to what it was prior to November 18th, 2018. My life's memories are now replaced by night terrors, feelings of helplessness and emptiness. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and received therapy for it. I'm scared most of the days. I smell smoke, and loud noises always make me jump. I've seen many friends and acquaintances move away, and I'm saddened every day by the death of Vincent. And I blame myself, which I should not. I called Vincent the morning of the fire and told him that he needed to apply his prosthetic leg, pack his medications, and we needed to get out now. He thought I was being very dramatic. He said the fire was in the canyon and not to worry about it. And he was watching TV. Electricity was still on. He felt safe. For 13 minutes, I begged him, please leave. Leave with me. I'm leaving. I have to get out of here. I want to leave. I want to live. I have a family. I have my children, grandchildren, and I want to live. Vinny did not leave. He stayed in his home. He did not call me again. I lost the cell phones went down, and I left. And I think of Vinny every day. Should I have done more? He was 6'5" and weighed 300 pounds and had one leg. I was just recovering 4 weeks post-op from left knee surgery, and I was on crutches. I would have somehow gotten him in my little car. I already figured that out. I got 2 other neighbors out. They left, and Vincent would not. I have also been publicly humiliated by a member of the Kuroda family, which made me feel even worse. We were notified the day before the fire, the 7th, by our maintenance manager in regards to a possibility of the grid being turned off. PG&E was going to do some maintenance work. Okay, I notified Vincent that day. I said, get your batteries, get your candles, whatever, I'll come down and make sure you're all right. As far as the morning of the fire, we were not notified of any problems. I saw my walls were turning pink. I was going out to get a donut for myself and a neighbor, and the walls in my house were turning pink. I said, what's wrong? I went out, I saw the smoke. So I immediately started packing up my car with 2 dogs and a neighbor who couldn't walk, and I got gas and, excuse me, gas and monies. Vinny still wouldn't leave. So I had to leave him there. I think of him every day. I'm not able to give my son and my granddaughters any of my treasures. They're all gone. Everything. My grandmother's china, jewelry, my mother's pearls. My father gave her in 1944 as a 5th anniversary gift. I wanted my granddaughters to wear those the day they got married. It's not going to happen. I left with a sweatshirt, jeans, and a pair of shoes with a hole in it and 2 dogs. That's all. I arrived at my son's house 2 days later in Monterey, where my daughter-in-law, my son, and the extended family took care of me for 3 months. Some things can be replaced, but life's treasures we intend to pass on to our children cannot. It's with great sadness that I must live out my remaining days with this horrific event as a memory. And the memory of Vincent's last moments here on earth. It will haunt me forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuroda.
Next victim to be spoken of is Andrew Downer by his brother Joseph Downer.
Good morning, Mr. Downer. If you could please, for the record, tell us your name and spell your last name, please.
Joseph Downer, D-O-W-N-E-R.
And make sure you get close enough to that microphone so we can all hear you. Go ahead.
Andy was my older brother. We are the oldest boy, youngest boy. This guy taught me how to ride a bike when I was a little kid. This is hard. I spoke to my brother 16 minutes before the fire hit his house. I could hear the stuff exploding. I could hear the fear in his voice. He had one leg also. It's kind of weird. I keep hearing that over and over through this thing. And he told me he couldn't get out. He was on his wheelchair ramp waiting for paramedics or fire department to come get him. I said, okay, I love you. He goes, I love you too. I love your kids. And that's the last time I talked to my brother. You know, I frantically called him for the next 2 days. My wife had a friend whose husband was up in the area fighting the fire, and they went to the house and found my brother's remains on his wheelchair ramp. This whole thing's got me frazzled, so I might skip around, and I apologize for that. But I remember going to the house the first time, and when a body burns on concrete, it leaves a little halo. I have a picture, and I know I submitted it to the courts. I know you've seen it. But that's what wakes me up at night, the sounds of the exploding things that were in the phone when I talked to my brother. I've literally got up in the middle of the night, threw my daughter over my shoulder, and ran out the house, thinking the house was on fire. I'm on antidepressant meds. I've had to deal with my little daughter who loved her Uncle Andy, wake up in the middle of the night screaming, thinking she's in the house with my brother burning. So, you know, this whole event's been super tragic. I have a son who, in fact, turns 2 next week. I remember how proud I was when I called my brother and said, hey, I'm having a son. And he goes, cool. And I said, I want to name him after you. This is my big brother. This is the guy who taught me so much in life, to be a man, to stand on my feet, to do the right thing. And PG&E took all this from me, all of it. So I'm going to read this little statement, and then we'll call it at that, okay, Your Honor?
That's fine.
Given PG&E's history, it is pretty clear that this company won't change until some PG&E executive actually goes to jail. A $3.5 million fine for killing 80 people is not justice. Can you imagine what would happen if an ordinary citizen killed more than 80 people? Yet here we are with a prior felon having killed more than 80 people, essentially going unpunished. We have a social compact in this society, and we give up the right to take matters into our own hands because the court, this court, is supposed to provide justice. I don't believe justice is served by a $3.5 million fine. That is less than Mr. Johnson, the person here yesterday telling us how sorry PG&E makes in 1 year. I am not blaming the court because I know you can only impose the sentence allowed by law, but I cannot believe that a PG&E executive who was making millions of dollars and refusing to repair and replace antiquated systems gets off scot-free. I watched PG&E enter its plea yesterday, and I would like to know if Mr. Johnson flew here and left here on a private jet. It disgusts me that PG&E can fly its executives around the state but can't pay $13 to replace a C-hook. It disgusts me that PG&E can pay millions of dollars in executive bonuses and not pay $13 for a new C-hook. It disgusts me that PG&E can pay $5.4 billion in dividends to shareholders and not pay $13 for a C-hook. I quote Judge Alsup, if ever there was a corporation that deserved to go to prison, it's PG&E for the number of people it killed in California. My brother Andrew Downer paid the ultimate price because PG&E, a convicted felon, just did not give a damn. My family will never get over the loss of my brother. How many times can PG&E say it is sorry before real justice is imposed? Yesterday, I heard Mr. Johnson say PG&E was sorry and that PG&E would never forget what happened in Butte County. He said PG&E had learned its lesson and was taking steps to make PG&E operate safely. Well, Mr. Johnson and PG&E, I don't believe you, and here's why. On April 9th, 2015, after killing 8 people in San Bruno, Tony Early, one of Mr. Johnson's predecessors, said, and I quote, "We are deeply sorry for this tragic event, and we have dedicated ourselves to re-earning the trust of our customers and communities we serve. The lessons of this tragic event will not be forgotten. We want our customers and their families to know that all of us at PG&E have committed ourselves to the goal of transforming this company to the safest, most reliable energy provider in America." In just the next 3 years, PG&E killed more than 120 people. So PG&E, you will excuse me if I don't believe you. I don't believe anything you have said. And the person who should be sitting here as a defendant is Geisha Williams, the PG&E CEO who was in charge in November of 2018. Instead, she was paid $9.3 million in 2018 and left PG&E with another $2.5 million in severance. Yet somehow PG&E would not pay $13 to replace the C-hook. That failure killed my brother and so many other people that day, and Paradise was truly lost. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Downer.
The next victims to be spoken of, Your Honor, are Ernest Foss and Andrew Burt, by daughter and sister Angela Liu.
Good morning, Ms. Liu. If you could please tell us your name and spell your last name, please.
My name is Angela Liu. My last name is spelled L-O-O.
And make sure you're close up to that microphone. Thank you.
Deep breaths after the mask, excuse me. First, I'd like to start off by thanking you, Your Honor, and this court, the District Attorney's Office, and the Victims Support Unit for making this opportunity for us. And I'd like to say to my fellow next of kin, thank you for sharing your stories, and my experiences resonate with yours. Thank you. My name is Angela Liu. I'm the eldest child and only daughter of the late Ernest Foss, age 63, a retired musician and computer guru, and stepsister of the late Andrew Burt, age 36, my father's in-home caregiver and avid gamer. My father was the first person to be identified and confirmed as deceased in the Camp Fire, the most destructive in California's history. Andrew followed shortly thereafter. On November 8th, 2018, my father, Ernie, my papa, my stepbrother Andrew, and our family dog Bernice were killed in the Camp Fire, which devastated their town of residence, Paradise, California. At least 83 others also lost their lives in Paradise and the nearby towns of Magalia and Concow. Details of the Camp Fire, the cause, the associated losses are well known. These exhibit PG&E's long-standing company culture of profit over people in the worst way imaginable. Complete disregard of the sanctity of life, the lives of many, for the benefit of the few. Though there is some comfort, PG&E pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter. The crime feels far worse to those grieving the loss of loved ones, myself included. Speaking in demographics is far simpler than attempting to describe the impact of the Camp Fire and its aftermath. For my father, Ernie, my brother Andrew, and our beloved pup Bernice, the impact was death. One might argue there's a death of the worst kind imaginable, being burned alive. One phrase resonates in me since the day of the Camp Fire. There are no words. You cannot possibly imagine what it was like for my family, roused from their beds by neighbors who'd seen evacuation orders on their cell phone, something my family on fixed income, which just covered their needs, didn't own. There are no words to describe the anxiety and dread when Papa and Andrew realized they couldn't call for help because the phone lines were down. Waiting anxiously for first responders, sure that they would come because my Papa, being bedbound, was on a list of people needing assisted evacuation. The fear and desperation which overcame them when they realized no one was coming. The struggle to get my papa out of his bed and into a wheelchair and outside to their minivan. Their increasing fear and panic as they begged for help that people fleeing couldn't give, lest they lose their own lives. And some tried. Excuse me. The crushing realization and what must have been a heartbreaking decision for them. The situation was hopeless. Papa would stay to await death in his wheelchair in the driveway, while my stepbrother tried to escape the now present firestorm with our dog Bernice in the minivan. The horror and terror they felt as a wall of fire moved over them, burning them alive, alone. Their end. There are no words to describe the transition from cautious concern to dark realization as the word of a fire on the ridge turned to evacuation orders. And I received call after call that people could not reach my papa. The anxiety of calling the house phone repeatedly and receiving no answer, not even the answering machine. And then full-blown panic as the house phone tone changed from endless ringing to a strange electronic static. You can't imagine the desperation as I called everyone I could think of to ask if any first responder could assist in their evacuation. Of course, all signals busy, no one answered, not even the fire station less than a mile from them. There are no words to describe the dread I felt as I finally reached Butte County 911 via Washington County Sheriff's Office in Oregon, where I live, to be told that they had many inquiries already on my father and also many, many others, and they would let me know as soon as they were able to get out and take a look. There are no words to describe the terror and horror I experienced as I was sent videos of people trying to escape the flames, some of whom were escaping from his street on Edgewood Lane. Though not physically on site, I lived every moment through those who were while trying to find my family. The helplessness, there are no words to describe, the helplessness, knowing your loved ones are in danger and being powerless to do anything to help or save them. The fading hope as the phone tree our family mobilized to call every hospital, shelter, and nursing home produced no trace of them. The disbelief I experienced when people I didn't know reached out through my husband's Facebook with videos showing my brother's charred body and our dog's charred remains next to our burned out minivan, believing that that was my family and that they were passed away. The complete and utter despair when I was notified first that my papa and then a few days later my stepbrother were gone, as was everything they had in the world. The terrible task of having to inform others, including Papa's son, Andrew's brother, my Papa's brother, and my Papa's beloved granddaughters, Ruby Marie and Melelani, among others. The burden of guilt, if I'd only been there, because I was supposed to be, just a few days before. The knowledge that Papa and Andrew died scared and alone. Though material things are the least of it, there are no words to describe the complete and appalling loss of our family history. the mementos, our heritage, my father's musical legacy, including recordings and written copies of my papa's original music, his music collection, memorabilia, and his beloved instruments, our inheritance. There are no words to describe the shock of sifting through the ashes at 5236 Edgewood Lane in the blessed pouring rain, the day after Thanksgiving 2018, in a failed attempt to locate my stepmother's ashes, which had been at the home at the time of the fire. Seeing the spot my papa was found, his metal wheelchair frame and the oxygen tank and tubing still sitting beside it, and a garden hose nearby as if they tried to protect themselves until they realized the water wasn't working either. Sifting through the ashes for days, weeks, in a vain attempt to find anything that might be left behind, anything that might have survived. The trauma and haunting memory of viewing my papa's burned face and charred corpse. The guilt I felt at having to put both Papa and Andrew through fire again as they were cremated. What was left of them? This is the only thing I have left from that. This guitar pick. That's my dad. There are no words to describe the impact of the traumatic loss of the lives of loved ones. We can't know the total effect. It's impossible. Papa's youngest son, Brendan, lost a father and a brother at the age of 20. His stepson, James Burt, Andrew's brother, like Brendan, also lost a brother and a father figure on the same day. Papa's brother lost a brother and a father figure, and their many, many friends lost their positive influence and caring ways, and being part of their lives. His granddaughters, many grandchildren, losing their beloved Grandpa Ernie and Uncle Andrew and Bernice. They loved them so much, and they loved going to visit them in paradise. It really was paradise. I was raised by my papa, a single dad. I'm a daddy's girl for sure. And I've lost my champion, the one who believed in me the most. He called me his wonderkind. Daily, I mourn the loss of kinship and shared history. He and my younger brother, who is deceased, being my immediate family unit when I was growing up. So I'm what's left of that. No one else knows my story. I'm alone in that. There will be no more hugs, weekly phone calls, stories of wild rock and roll days, no more visits, no more stocking up shopping trips and cooking 2 months worth of food, no more quietly shared space. There are no words to describe the absolute truth that there is no area of my life not impacted by the loss of my family, my papa especially. I write this with no guile. This has ruined my life. There are no words to describe the impact on my physical and mental health, the effects of post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and panic on my ability to function normally. The impact on my husband and daughter and family as they too deal with grief and loss, including that of my ability to care for them as I once did. The daily struggle with executive function, I have cognitive issues and reduced stress tolerance. The impact on my career, nearly lost after being unable to work for nearly 8 months, and frankly, it's still at risk if I don't perform up to snuff. And that's very difficult for me right now. The financial impact of such a leave of absence, the inability to erase the images burned into my memory, literally. The nightmares I have to this day of burning to death, running from fire, save them, panicking anytime I smell smoke or see it, not being able to save them. I have yet to find peace. I am forever changed, and not for the better. I almost did not write this statement. I struggled with the purpose of it, given the fact that those listening aren't responsible for the decisions which led to the demise of my loved ones and so many others. However, on behalf of all for the PG&E leaders listening today, you and your successors are responsible for ensuring a tragedy like Camp Fire doesn't happen again. Please learn from the mistakes of your predecessors. Do better. Do the right thing. Put people over profits and dividends. Do right by the people. Protect them and protect the state of California. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Liu.
The next victim to be spoken of is Elizabeth Gale, Gaal, and by her daughter Giselle Roebuck.
Good morning, Ms. Roebuck. If you could please, for the record, if you could tell us your name and spell your last name for us.
Giselle Roebuck, Roebuck.
Thank you, Ms. Roebuck. You may go ahead.
We were asked to present a statement regarding how we've been impacted by the Camp Fire, by the loss of our loved ones, and I really don't know what to say. There are no words for it. I lost my mother. My son lost his only living grandparent. There's no way to describe how alone you feel after something like this. But instead of dwelling on us, I'd rather talk about who my mother was. She came to this country in 1956 during the Hungarian Revolution. She was 18 years old, didn't speak a word of English. She survived war. Throughout the years in Paradise, she worked as a housekeeper, caregiver for a number of affluent families there. She cleaned their homes. She took care of their children, their elderly parents, their pets, as though they were her own. She was the type of person that they could leave money, valuables, the combination to their safe with her, and they could leave with peace of mind. My mother was the most ethical person I've ever known. She always did the right thing, even when no one was watching. Had that mindset been in play, with PG&E, this would have been avoided. My mom and my son's grandmother is gone. Bye, Mom.
Thank you, Ms. Roebuck.
The next victim to be spoken on the list, Your Honor, was T.K. Huff. The persons who were unable to be here today. We will go to Ethel Riggs and her daughter, I believe it's Mariel. I may have butchered that. All right, I wasn't trying the last one.
Is it Ms. Wisotsky? And could you spell that and tell us your first name, please?
My first name is Mariel, and my last name is Wisotsky.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You may go ahead.
My mother, Ethel Colleen Riggs, was an amazing woman of 96. She was independent. She lived in a house by herself. She still drove. She cooked for herself, took care of the house, and she was very close to her family. My sister and I are her survivors, and she had 3 grandchildren that are survivors too. She was the heart of our family. All of the holidays revolved around her. She was kind of like a touchstone for all of us. I used to come up and visit her. I live in Sacramento. I'd come up and visit at least for overnight, sometimes for as long as a week, and I always felt like I was going on vacation because we would have such a good time together. We would go out to eat, we would go shopping, we would discuss politics. She kept up on everything, and we just had a good time doing things together, cooking together, sharing things, sharing memories. She had traveled all over the world. And the only thing that was wrong with her was she was getting a little deaf and her knees were bad. That's it. She was otherwise in great shape. I mention this because I think we have a tendency in this country to write off older people. And a lot of the people who died in this fire were older because of the nature of Paradise, that a lot of people retire there, like my parents did, and also because of the fact that when you're older, it's harder for you to get out of a situation like that. I think that you can see it with the COVID virus, the way people have said callous things like, oh, it's all right, it's just culling the elderly, or we don't have to worry because only the old people are dying. There are 2 problems with this. One, obviously, is that it devalues all life when we take anyone's life and say, this person is not important for any reason. It devalues it for all of us. The other reason is that we have a stereotype that because you're old, you are no longer of value. Obviously, you are of value to the people who love you, but no longer can we assume that someone who's 96 is going to be senile and bedridden and no longer contributing. They could be like my mom, fully engaged with life, fully engaged with her family, and already thinking about what she was going to do for her 100th birthday party. The morning of the fire, my nephew got up and was watching television and saw about the fire. He called her and said, get ready to evacuate. And she got her bag together and everything, waiting for the call that never came. She went out finally after he called again and said, you better leave now, because he knew about fires. He had been a volunteer with the Magalia Fire Department. And she went out to get in her car, and she couldn't open the door because it was electronic and there was no more electricity. She wanted to use the pull cord, but it was over the car and she couldn't get to it. So she called my nephew, and one of my nephews said to her, I'll come get you, Grandma. He, like others, could not get up to where she was because the police rightly had closed off all the roads. My other nephew, the one who'd been the volunteer fireman, had known people in the fire department, the police department, and EMTs and called all of them and said, here is a woman who's trapped in her home. Try to save her. No one could get to her. If anyone had gotten to her, they would have died too. But this is a very public fire. I'm watching it. My nephew called me to ask if I'd heard from her. And I was watching it then on television as it all unfolded. It's a very public thing. So everyone has an opinion about that. How if they had been there, oh, I would have gotten out because I would have gone to the swimming pool, or I would have driven through the garage door. Lots of people told me that one. And I thought, I wouldn't have thought of that, and I doubt she did. And if she had, what would have happened? She probably would have died in her car. People who haven't been through a fire don't know what a fire's like. My house burnt down 2 years before this fire, a totally unrelated thing. PG&E had nothing to do with this fire. And I know what it's like. There's nothing you can do except get out if you're able to. And that's what we did with our clothes on our back and what was in my husband's pockets. And that was it. And I lost everything then. What my mother had in her house, that was all lost. My sister lived in Magalia and lost her house, but not her life. But she lost all her things too. So we have nothing left of that. But that's not important. What's important is losing my mother that way. And we all expect these days to have time to say goodbye. We expect somebody to get sick, and unless there's some kind of accident, we expect them to be in the hospital a while. We expect to be able to go there and say goodbye, get used to the idea, even start the grieving process early like that. None of that happened because it was instantaneous. And the public nature of this made it so that everything would bring it up. All the specials on TV, watching those horrible things on YouTube that you obsessively watch, and watching people trying to drive out through that fire and knowing how bad it must have been for it to be like that. Knowing what it must have been for my mother, who had said it was already black outside from the smoke the last time she talked to them, knowing that she knew the fire was coming, that no one was getting to her, knowing that. And it doesn't take very long. I think she died very fast because the way fires go, they take all the oxygen out of the air. They fill the air with smoke. You die very quickly. And you usually die long before the actual fire gets to you. But I walked back into my house when my house burned like an idiot. I took a deep breath. I thought, I'll get something and take it out. I stepped in there immediately. It was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. And I thought, if I don't turn around right now and go back out that door, I could die here. It's that fast. But I had time to think that. And I know that however fast it was, she had time to think about those things. And at night, that's what I think about. I lie there in bed and start reliving those last moments she must have gone through. And then I try to give myself something else to obsess about so that I don't do that anymore. Because what can you do? But normally, you're able to put these things in perspective. You're able to realize that someone's dead and bury them and move on. Well, there was a problem with that too. The DNA that we gave, we were one of the first people to give DNA. And the fellow who had come from back east told us, yes, we'll start being able to identify people within maybe 2 weeks. Great, at least we'll know. And then that went on and on and on. And I called the coroner, and I called the sheriff, and I called here, and I called there. And no, we haven't done that yet. No, we haven't done that yet. And then I got a call that they had used up all the DNA my sister and I had given, all of it. And we had to give it again so they could try to match. That's when I moved to a new level of obsession and misery, because that brought it home to me how hot that must have been. They get DNA out of mummies. that are 4,000 years old. They get enough out of mummies that they can figure out which mummies are related to which other mummies. They couldn't get enough DNA out of my mother's remains to match it with us. They get it out of mammoths from the Ice Age. They get it out of amber. And they couldn't get enough DNA out of my mother's remains to match it. Finally, after 7 months, and I had also tried to get the help of the representative for Butte County to help us get her identified. And not identified, but declared dead. And I couldn't do that. I finally had to get my lawyer to do it. Now, why was it so important to do that? Well, if you don't have a death certificate, or if you are not declared the representative of someone in the right kind of paperwork, you can't do any of the paperwork that the people leave behind them. You could call Social Security, you could call their medical, you could call their bank, you could call you can call PG&E, you can call their TV company, you can call to cancel their cable, and all of those people will tell you, I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you because you don't have a death certificate. I couldn't turn off her TV. I couldn't get that settled because I had no death certificate. Instead, I kept getting all of this stuff at my house all the time. And since my sister was dealing with the loss of her house, I was dealing with my mother's business. So all the time, I keep getting all of this stuff, and I keep making these endless calls. And if you have ever called about anything to a company, you know it's not easy to call normally. You know, it's hit this button for this and hit that button for that, and you know there's no button on your phone for a fire or your dead mom. There's no button. Sorry, I'm getting a little wound up here, but it's, you know, it kept it so alive in my mind, and it kept bringing it up, all of these things again and again. And finally, with the pressure of our lawyer, we got the sheriff and the coroner to agree to declare that nobody else could be that person that remains that they found there. And we got the death certificate, and we were able to do some of that stuff. But I have to live with that recurring nightmare of thinking about those last moments that we know quite a bit about, because we know where she was found in the house. We know what she was going through her mind that morning because she was on the phone with her nephews. And my nephews, they're still beating themselves up thinking, maybe I could have gotten there, maybe I could have done something. And even though there was nothing to do. And my sister and I have to deal with the loss, as my nephews and niece do, of not having mom, who we enjoyed so much in our lives. Our family's scattered all over the place. Our life together as a family is broken. And we have lost all of these things. It's not the same as somebody's mom died. That happens to all of us if things happen in the normal process that your parents die before you. But when they die like this, it's like losing someone on 9/11 without the terrorist aspect, but the fact that it's something that is so massive that it affects all of Northern California. You talk to anybody and they know someone. If it isn't them personally, they know somebody. Or they know somebody whose brother lost something, or their house, or their family, or somehow affected by it. This is our tragedy of Northern California. And it comes up again and again, and every time it comes up, we all relive all of that again. And it will go on for a long time because this is the worst fire we have ever had in California. And every time a fire comes up, they mention that. The worst fire was. Every time PG&E comes up, they mention the fires. And every time they do, it's like a little knife in the heart and a twist. And we go through it all again. And we have another sleepless night. I want to thank you for allowing us to do this, and I thank all of those involved with the process who have made this possible and have been so supportive. And I want to say that while I too doubt the sincerity of the CEO yesterday, I felt better hearing him say all those times when each count was read, "Guilty, Your Honor." I found that cathartic. Whether or not he really felt guilty was irrelevant to me. Hearing that said, "Yes, we are guilty, Your Honor," made a difference to me. So I'd like to thank you all for helping with this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wysocki.
Close enough.
The next victim to be spoken of is Kimber Ware by her stepfather, Tom LeBlanc.
Mr. LeBlanc, good morning. If you could please tell us your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Tom LeBlanc, L-E, capital B-L-A-N-C.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Go ahead.
I'm Tom LeBlanc, stepfather of victim Kimberly Ware, who was 53 years old, disabled, and living on a disability pension. Her greatest fear was becoming homeless, so her mother, Pat LeBlanc, and I purchased a home for her in Paradise, allowing her to easily walk to Safeway, the library, the food bank, and her pharmacy. Even with her limited resources, Kimberly, who adored her pets, also bought consumables for her network of less fortunate friends, from which she gained much pleasure. She was offbeat, brilliant, witty, funny, and a challenge in her own childlike manner of understanding danger. On November 8th, 2018, in a matter of 4 hours, we lost our retirement home and all of our lifelong possessions. The home we bought for Kimberly and all her possessions. And the realization that Kimberly never made it out of her home and was killed in that blazing fire. The loss of our neighborhood and the loss of our beloved town, Paradise. The loss of Kimberly has deeply affected the mental health of her two siblings, Kent and Rebecca. In the early weeks after the fire, Ken had extreme difficulty focusing on just simple tasks. He had trouble sleeping and experienced anxiety and depression. Rebecca was depressed for days over the thought of how painful Kimber's last minutes were being overcome by fire and the breathing in of soot-filled hot air. These people up here on the wall they had lives. They're not just statistics. They had names. They were grandmothers, grandfathers, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, and in 4 hours, gone. A few days before November 8th, 2018, PG&E sent robocalls to all residents advising they would be working on inspecting a transmission tower. Are you kidding me, Your Honor? That tower was built in 1919. It outlived the guys who put it up there. but the repairs were never made. And today we know the consequence. Might this suggest that they knew there was a high risk in our area with these robocalls? Then on the morning of November 8th, a neighbor advised us that a wildfire was raging and headed toward Paradise. Shortly afterwards, we received a mandatory evacuation. My wife and I grabbed as many essential items as we could with the intention of driving across town to rescue Kimberly and her beloved pets. To our horror, the Paradise Police directed 2 lanes of traffic south to Orville down Pence Road. Traffic across town was impossible. And we were forced to follow the flow of traffic directed by law enforcement. This placed an unimaginable guilt on Pat that lasted for several months. I immediately called Kimberly, pleading with her to get her walker, her pets, and walk out to the street, assuring her that someone would give her a ride. Pat and I spent the next 5 days searching for Kimberly at all of the staged shelters for displaced families. And then the dreaded knock on the door, and the officer from the sheriff's office who informed us that Kimberly's remains were found in her home. A home where she had lived feeling safe, secure, comfortable, independent, and with family close by. Though that level of material and sentimental loss is devastating, the profound grief associated with losing an offbeat, brilliant, witty, kind, caring daughter in that raging fire is incomprehensible. Being unable to rescue your child is an incalculable parental nightmare. This fire could have been prevented. To compound that pain, Kimberly's mother had been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer in March of 2018 and was in treatment at the time of the campfire. The fire, the loss of 2 homes along with all possessions, and most deeply the loss of Kimber, had a direct impact on Pat's mental, physical, and emotional state of mind, fighting that dreaded disease. During those painful months after losing Kimberly, I observed firsthand Pat's inability to cope with the loss of her daughter. The personal failure and guilt of not rescuing Kimber from harm's way, and her feelings of despair that absolutely devastated her health. She lost her battle with cancer on December 6, 2019. I have now moved to a new home in Winters, California with our 2 pets, living alone with the memories of my beloved wife and daughter. That fire should never have happened. At Pat's celebration of life, both Kent and daughter Rebecca spoke of the positive impact Kimberly had on their lives and on their community. Her presence, her humor, her quick wit, her unique personality, her interest in spirit, and her love of her animals and friends elevated our community of Paradise. She had real comfort with her own home and her family nearby. That fire which caused the death of our Kimberly should never have happened. In closing, as a retired teacher, coach, and administrator with over 40 years of experience in the profession, I finished my career as the athletic coordinator of the 50-plus Department of Defense dependent high schools in Europe. At all times, I was constantly committed and dedicated to teaching these fine young athletes the importance of honor, respect, integrity, and sportsmanship. To ensure that all games were played with the spirit of the aforementioned, we hire officials, referees, and judges to ensure a level playing field. PG&E abdicated their responsibility to enforce the rules of safety to the citizens of Paradise, and thereby causing untold damage to the lives, the livelihoods, and the possessions of an entire town. In sports and in life, when one breaks a rule, a penalty must be assessed. Unfortunately, PG&E was busy putting profits and bonuses first. Safety is the only thing that should have received top priority. You leave this courtroom, Your Honor, as a victim, because I have been scarred for life. If they feel just a little bit of pain today from my story, mission accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc.
And that completes the morning session here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be in recess at this time. We will be reconvening at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.